All right, well, the reason that I'm holding this webinar is because people try really hard and they put a lot of time and effort in to accomplish whatever it is they're trying to do, but not everybody is aware of some of the tools that they could use where they could figure out how things work and why and what they could do differently so they can accomplish more with less effort. Okay, so that's what this is all about. We want to get the word out that, if you want to double your profit or double how much you get done, it doesn't mean you have to duplicate everything that you've got now. Perhaps we could instead remove some of the obstacles that people have to face and, waste all their time and energy and cause them to be unnecessarily stressed out, right? So this is about discovering and harnessing the hidden potential that we have as individuals, but even more so as organizations. So if we do so, we can have less stress and better results. So what we're going to cover here, things can be a lot better with our existing resources, much better. Okay. And there's 3 big improvement methodologies. I'm not going to get into a ton of detail on that, but it's important to be aware of them. And then what it's like to apply those if you know how to use each of them and how they synergistically work together and do it in a pretty eloquent, streamlined way. And at the end, I'm just going to go over like how you could roll out training to an organization and just give some of the classes that I have available to help out with that. I hear people say like, not interested. We don't have any demand for that in our area. And it's like, well, wouldn't you like to put in about 20 or 30% less effort and get about 25 to 50% more done? I mean, most of us would, but don't realize that that's possible, right? Does that make sense? It is. I mean, things can be a lot easier. Let's just start with the very basics. What do organizations actually want? Okay. They want efficacy, which means the ability to produce the desired result that they were created for in the first place. Another way to say it is they want the power to produce an effect that they're supposed to create. Business results that companies want, they want to make money now as well as in the future. Try to run an organization with just everybody happy, but you can't do that. You don't have an organization. Okay, make sense? A lot of that's getting left out in our happy little LinkedIn, like the 5 steps to have happy employees, right? Well, they have to have a job, in order to be employed, which means the company has to make some money. Okay, make sense? All right, so the other thing that you have to do as an organization is satisfy your stakeholders now and in the future. So you can't sell out the future to hit your numbers by Friday, right? Just sacrifice everything, cut every corner, right? And the key stakeholders that we have to keep happy, the owners of the organization, the customers, the employees, and the suppliers. Stewardship is the careful and responsible management of something that's entrusted to someone with an eye to the future. Okay, so you get to be in charge of this, but when you move on, it still needs to be in good shape, right? So that it's not like totally useless. All right. So you could also say it's responsible planning and management of the resources that are under our authority so that we can attain the short and long-term goals of whoever gave us that authority to begin with. Okay, does that make sense? That's what a good steward is. So if I got this budget, I got this number of people, I got this number of machines, what can I accomplish with that without running it in the ground so that it's totally useless by the time I move on? For a lot of you, you probably are facing a day-to-day battle that looks a little something like this, right? Your organization has people going in all different directions trying to get an A on their report card. However, they might happen to be measured, okay? And what we would like to have happen is we look a little something like this. These are all the same arrows. They're just not in total state of chaos, okay? Like survival of the fittest over here. All right, makes sense? So a lot of this has to do with how we're measured. It drives our behavior. We want to get an A on our report card so we can get our bonuses, so we can get our raises, and so on, right? Here's the good news. We haven't yet reached our potential. Our performance can be much, much better with the resources that we already have. We have wastes and we have obstacles that consume our resources, but when we're facing them, we're not producing anything of value, okay? We might be getting thicker skin or stronger muscles by facing them, but we're not actually accomplishing anything, getting anything across the finish line. So what am I talking about here? Imagine that you have a certain amount of time available called 24 hours, okay? And during that time, you can get X amount done per unit of time, okay? That's how much load you can carry. Well, what happens is we have all these things go wrong that eat away our potential, and we only utilize a smaller portion of what we could get done. So we have things that eat our time, and we have things that affect how much we could carry during that time. All right, so I'm calling those deterrents. You could call them diversions, whatever, but they hinder your performance and they consume leadership time and attention. We have disruptions, distractions, defects, downtime, delays, and you name it. All right, I've got a little exercise for you guys to do, give you a feel for what it's like to face some obstacles. Don't start yet because it's a timed exercise. You're going to write quality and continuous improvement. So the way we're going to do this is you're going to first write the Q, then the C, then the I, then you're going to come back up to the top and do the U and the O and the M and work on the second letter. Then you'll come back up and do the third letters. Does that make sense to everybody? And you'll keep doing that until you get all the way to the end. All right, so when you're done with it, look up at my stopwatch and then write the time down. Okay, does everybody understand what to do? Any questions? All right, on your marks, get set, and go. 99, 37, 54, Q, W, Volkswagen. Utilization, stewardship, performance, dodecahedron, paramecium, focus, distraction, random noise, blood pressure, stress, anger, disruptive interruptions. I can't wait till it's Friday. All right, so look up at my stopwatch when you're done. And if anybody's not done, just put 1 minute. I just want you to get the concept. It's so that you can just see what happens when you have to work like that versus you get to work and focus. Okay, make sense? So what'd you guys think about that?
I think that sounds like my day.
That's what I was going to say. Absolutely.
It makes it a little hard to get much quality and improvement done if you're just like, oh my gosh, oh, you know.
I had to start all over with every word, it seemed like.
Yeah, that's unnatural. Very unnatural, isn't it? But if you think about it, some of the processes you guys have to do for your jobs don't flow very well. You know, you realize it should go A through Z. You should be able to like knock out a big chunk, and then if you do get interrupted, pick up right where you left off and finish it out, right? Anyways, now we're going to do it again, except this time I'm going to leave it up here and you can just go straight across and finish it from from the beginning, okay? Just like you would read it or write it normally, okay? Does anybody have any additional requests before we start? Did anybody find me disrupting or aggravating?
Oh, yeah, a
Yeah,
little
but-
distracted.
So any suggestions?
Be quiet.
Yep, very good. So sometimes you got to set a boundary, right? Somebody comes barging into your office and just starts talking like you've just been waiting for them to fill you in on something or start making demands of you. And you could be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Time out. I'm right in the middle of something. I got to finish it. Come back in 5 or 10 minutes, or when I wrap it up, I'll come find you, right? Sometimes you got to set a boundary, but of course, do it respectfully and humbly. All right, everybody ready? Know what to do? I'll tell you what, I'll even leave it up there in case anybody has any trouble spelling. All right. On your marks, get set, and go. Yeah, a little better, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, much better.
Yep. How many of you did it in half the time or less?
Way less.
Yeah. So that's what it's like. A lot of our processes, we haven't got them set up yet so that they can flow smoothly and we can just knock it out with a rhythm and flow through to the end. In most of our jobs, it's like we take 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, and it's like, there's got to be a better way. And usually there are. Okay. So what this is really like is like when you're multitasking. This is just like switching back and forth between 3 projects, or like, you know, taking a phone call, getting an email, having to go to a meeting. Somebody asked you for help and you've got to leave wherever you're working and go help them and come back. You know, all these types of things keep you from running your race and finishing it out. Very important for you to block off certain time on your calendar to where you can focus on things. Okay. You might not be able to block the whole thing off, right? But you can block off chunks so you can get as far as fast as you can on something you need to concentrate on. Okay. That's my little trick that I do. Okay. So remember when I showed you that utilization is smaller than it could be? Well, that's part of it. We're constantly getting pulled in a lot of different directions, making improvements. There's this thing called Fuduaka. Okay. Did you guys know you're going to learn some Japanese today? No, just kidding. It's an acronym. Okay. Whenever you see all capital letters, it's not necessarily a word. But those of you that are familiar with Lean, you know there's a lot of Japanese terminology in that, right? So when we're talking about Fuduaka, we're talking about your born-in human red flag system. It lets you know that there's waste, there's obstacles and symptoms. Oh my, right? That's like a little Wizard of Oz pun there, right? Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. The Fuduaka are the things that make leadership and the employees feel frustrated, upset, disappointed, worried, angry, concerned, and anxious, because they want to do a good job. They want to get an A on their report card, but a lot of times they're putting in 120% effort and they're getting an 80% on their report card. Sometimes it's much worse. Maybe they're putting 150% effort in, they're getting a 75 on their report card. So these things that make them feel these emotions are red flags that point to you that something in the process is probably slowing them down or making it more difficult than it should be. They can't just get their quality done. They just can't get their improvement done, right? Make sense? So we start with talking to people, right? And we can also then gather facts and data about that to see which things we should address first. Okay, but we start by talking to people. So here's another really cool thing. a lot of the improvements that we can make to save ourselves tons of time and energy don't cost much. A lot of them are actually free. And, you know, it doesn't matter how many trillions of dollars somebody adds to the budget and how big of a bureaucracy you create around that. It doesn't mean that you're going to solve the problem if you don't understand the root cause and address it. So throwing people and money at problems does not equal solving it. Make sense? The good thing is many solutions to our problems are free or extremely inexpensive. Okay, so what this means in management terms, we're going to affect the percentages of things, the dollars of things, and we can translate those into high return on investment and very short payback times. And the training that we give people on making improvements helps them to speak that language. And that allows them to translate what they know into what managers can use so they can make an easy layup or slam dunk it. Normally, if you tell them you need $500 to do something, they're like, no, what? Don't understand it. You can't explain it. Not going to get it approved, right? But if you can explain it and that $500 pays itself every 2 hours, they're going to approve it. Okay, does that make sense? Or if it pays itself off 4 or 5 times within a month, that's a good investment. Nobody likes to spend money, but if it helps you to make more money, then it's the right thing to do. Many common sense tools can be adapted from improvement methodologies that have been around for 30 or 40 years and can be applied to processes and our products and services that we have in our organizations. Okay, so that brings me to the big 3 improvement methodologies. The first one is Lean. How many of you have heard of that? Most of you, right? So this has been around since maybe the 90s in the US, but it existed before that. So this is all about reducing waste in your processes and making the value flow from beginning to end. The value is what the customers are willing to pay for. And it's got a paradigm shift. We start to understand that just because we're busy doesn't mean that we're scoring points with the customer and making the organization more money. So there's 3 types of activities that Lean helps open up people's minds and the way they see things differently. And it's got some really powerful improvement tools that are pretty universal, but you have to understand them enough to apply it and tailor it to your situation. That's where, you know, sometimes people say like, well, we tried that and it didn't work. It's like, well, just like when you copy and paste in Word or Excel or PowerPoint, you got to make sure the format's right. You use the right tool for at the right time on the right thing. With Six Sigma, this is about using teams and increasing our understanding and our insight of our processes and using data and facts to remove process variation. And once we understand how it works, we keep those important variables under control. Okay, so imagine your process is like all over, you know, we have an average here, but we have lows and highs, and it's like, ooh, crazy. You never know what you're going to get. So they figure out what variables cause the low performance. We don't want those. So we try to eliminate the conditions that lead to that. And then we check out, well, what was going on when we had high performance? We want to replicate those conditions and make that our norm. Okay, so instead of being like all over the place and averaging here, we eliminate this stuff and replicate that. We bump our average up, and then it's more consistent. It's like consistently high. Okay, makes sense? So there's a lot of tools that come in the Six Sigma toolbox. People used to think that these things were incompatible, right? It's like, tastes great, less filling, tastes great, less filling. And it's like, well, you know what? You can have both, right? Reduce waste and obstacles and reduce variation. You know, what is there to argue about? Lean will get you a ton of low-hanging fruit and fruit on the ground. Six Sigma is very useful when you to understand deeper and you're solving like the #1 problem in the industry for the last 20 years. And you want it to solve it in like 3 months, okay? Not deal with it for another 20 years, all right? And that I've done that multiple times. Okay. It takes the fear and the scariness out of problems. It's like you just go through the methods and it shows you the facts and stuff that you need to make good decisions and make it go away. It's pretty cool. All right. Then we have theory of constraints. Most of you probably haven't heard of this. Has anybody heard of it? If you haven't heard of that, this is a great book. The Goal gives you a powerful focus for your improvements by focusing on the part of your organization or your process that hinders the output the most. Okay. And then it also has this thing called buffer management. So that variation that you can't control yet, you account for it. So every day when it happens, Murphy's on the prowl. You guys know Murphy, right? What can go wrong will go wrong. When Murphy's on the prowl and you've got this variation, it accounts for it like a shock absorber. Here's a constraint. A system is limited by the components or the resources that have the least capacity or capability to keep up with the rest of the system. Okay, so imagine you've got 1 million new orders. Some part of your organization can't handle 1 million, right? So the first one to be completely clogged up, that's your constraint. Make sense? So imagine you could sell 10 million units per day, but you can only get 6 million out, right? Where are they going to go? They're going to be started, but they're going to be clogged up somewhere in your system, and they're going to have like 2 steps done out of like 50, right? They'll have however many steps done possible till they get stuck at the bottleneck, just like in traffic. All right, so when you first start your organization and you're trying to get business, it's kind of like this. You've got certain resources like this 3-lane freeway with the 75-mile-per-hour speed limit. And then you've got this bridge where it goes down to 45, and then this tunnel where it's 30. But since you're starting out, things flow through without too much of a problem. Okay, you've got plenty of capacity for a low volume. But as word gets out that you're awesome, you start picking up orders, it starts to get busy. Now you can still go 30 miles per hour through the tunnel, but back here, if they're letting each other merge, they can only go 15, okay? And back here, they can only go 10, again, if they're letting each other merge, right? So a common theme in organizations is they try to maximize their productivity and their efficiencies, thinking that if we get those numbers as high as possible, we'll make money, okay? So in this case, these guys have 100% productivity and efficiency. These guys, not so good. These guys, horrible. 10 miles per hour, they could be going 75. And this is the department with the most people too. So we're going to focus our improvements back here, right? Trying to pump up their productivity. And what are the VPs going to come up with? Well, we should build an off-ramp and a parking garage so they can keep working, and that'll boost up our productivity, right? We're going to buy a warehouse and get some more forklifts, and we'll just put all of our partially finished goods over there, and eventually we'll pull them out and put them over to the next department. It's like, well, if it doesn't come out the other end of the tunnel, you don't get paid, okay? And you spent, a few quadrillion dollars on this parking garage and ramp, okay? Make sense? So the bottleneck controls the flow rate. If it don't go through there, you can't ship it, you can't get paid. Make sense? Everybody knows Murphy's Law, right? Well, what if we have downtime at the bottleneck? Oops, 0 miles per hour here, 0 miles per hour back here. Not cool. And we're not getting anywhere fast, not efficient or effective. If these guys keep running, thinking that if they keep running, it doesn't matter if this other team crosses the finish line, you're going to get a pile up. Okay, makes sense? In organizations, they just do it. They pile it up over by, they'll pile as much up by the next station as possible till it gets too big, and then they'll make a big pile somewhere else. Okay, makes sense? So essentially, if the bottleneck flow stops, the system flow stops. They can keep producing, but the cash register has stopped ringing. Okay, so now I want you to take that concept and think about it in terms of this pipe diagram, okay? Your job is to get more liquid gold to flow through here. Which part of this system would you work on first if you want to get more out the other end?
D,
Yep, D, that's right, because it's restricting the flow the most, right? Where would you go next?
F,
Absolutely, then where?
B.
B. Yep, if you did that sequence for your improvements, you would have 10 times better results than any other sequence, okay? Because it doesn't go out the other end until you address those. And so the problem is you'll get people that have these certifications and they've got this training, they know all these tools, but they'll be like, look, I found this hammer. And they'll be like, let's go around and hit everything in the whole company first with this tool. Then we're gonna go and hit everything in the company with this wrench, right? Hammer, then wrench, okay? But they don't have a method to their madness because they can't see this thing, right? You can't look out at the shop floor across the office and see this cute little pipe diagram, right? Makes sense? So, but there's some tools that you can use so that you can visualize it. I'm going to show you that. So we need to keep this little concept in mind when we select the sequence of our improvement projects. Otherwise, it's back to that mountain thing. It's like you try to improve this part of the organization that has no impact other than increasing how much stuff you've started but haven't finished, right? Which means costs go up because you spent all this money on materials that you can't ship and your lead times go up, on-time delivery goes down. You're asking for trouble with quality. It's not good, okay? So now I'm going to show you this thing that I developed to bring those three big methodologies together. It's called the chain of solutions. So you're going to drive profitability and reduce people's stress with a series of improvements, okay? So imagine that these are all the product families that you produce in your company, right? And you've got to go through all these processes, A through Z, to get across the finish line. So what happens as companies grow and they add products, sometimes they'll add duplicate stations that specialize in certain types of products. Does that make sense? So we made this little dot and line diagram to show how it flows. But let's say like, okay, we're going to improve, but what should we improve, right? So let's say, well, we know that the market's kind of iffy. So we're going to do a strong market product because when it's going well, we can make tons of money, like we're printing money, okay? But we also want to have a slow market product because guess what? We might be heading into a recession. And then we want something that's what type of market we're in doesn't matter. It's people are going to buy it no matter what because they have to eat, okay? Make sense? So if we know we want to work on these, then we can look at which stations they go through. And the cool thing is some of these process steps have stations that are shared. So whenever we work on some of the processes, it actually has a benefit on other product lines, right? So whenever we work on those that are blue, it's also helping out this another product, okay? So then we want to think about out of these ones that we've identified, which one should we work on first? So we go back to this concept, all right? So this is where the chain of solutions comes in. So we got all our processes A through Z, and then we look at how much time does it take for a product to get through each of those stations. Okay, now the tallest one is going to limit our flow. Where's our bottleneck this time?
C,
Yep, then what?
D or P? D, I guess.
then, yep, D then P. Based on how tall they are, that's how long it takes to get through. So that's going to govern how much we can get done per day or per week, right? So we want to improve those three stations if we want to get more out the door. So what do? We identify and rank obstacles and wastes at each of these. So imagine that these are little pink Post-it notes that you come up with when you went and talked to the operators and supervisors at each of these stations, right? So they tell you this is wrong, that's wrong, this wrong, and then you have them rank them by the worst issue to the least. Okay, so you've got them categorized by impact. Then we measure we go and observe the process based on what they're telling us, and we just write down how much of it's happening, how much time does it eat up, and so on. So we have this green. This is the time that when we're operating those processes, it actually rings the cash register. Yellow, stuff that we do that we have to do so that we can be positioned to do a step that adds value. And then we have these other things that just waste our time and energy, okay? So once we do that, we can identify, we might move a couple of the obstacles around depending on what they are now that we have data, but usually they're pretty close based on what the operators, and we call those subject matter experts. You're the people that run the process. Then we can identify and rank the solutions. So we talk to the same people, share the data we have with them, and then ask them, what should we do about it? And now we have some green Post-it notes, and they say, these are all the things we could do to neutralize those problems we come up with. All right. So let's say we need to get 20% more sales, right? We would do these 10 things. We need to do these 4 to get this height down, these 3, then these 3. But we've got all these other ideas. So let's say we snapped our fingers and we implemented all those in, say, 3 months. All right. Because we got a burning platform, right? The old way is not going to do. We're going to hit an iceberg dead ahead. Okay. Makes sense? And I don't like to freeze and I don't like to drown. Okay. You guys know the Titanic story? All right. So if we do that, boom, we dropped the little dotted line represents where it used to be. Okay. Then we want 20% more. Well, guess what? We know all these extra things we can implement next. Okay. So now we do these 10 things to get 20% more sales compounded on top of what we already did. Okay. Then let's say we want to get 10% more on top of that. Okay. We do another 10 things. Notice they're not all at the same station. It just depends on the heights. All right. You see how that works? Now, this is about 40% shorter than it was. So we're getting a lot more through. Okay. Makes sense? Now it's less than half. So at this point, we're probably getting about double through. So when you get to this point, you might switch into, we were doing that with like a project team, going here and there and everywhere, wherever we wanted to go in the organization. And what you can do is, as you go to different stations, is you can set them up with so that they can continue to improve once you move on. And they can use this tool I call a 4-blocker. They track their performance versus a target. And they track what kind of obstacles and shenanigans do they have to deal with day by day. That's the red line. And then this over here is a breakdown of the issues that they're facing. So we would collect that for a week. And then we would meet with them and say, like, okay, out of all the stuff that went wrong, what are the top 5 you'd like to see go bye-bye? Okay. And what do we think are the root causes for those? What should we do about it? Who are the best people to do it? And what's a realistic target date? So we're getting people to own their process and figure out what to do to make it better, not just like follow the rules because rules are rules and it's the way we've always done things. I've got to bang my head against this wall over here every day until I retire, right? It's like, no, we don't have to do that. Okay, makes sense? So this is an important tool that they learn in fundamentals of problem solving, data-driven continuous improvement, or yellow belt class. So this is a fundamental tool, right? And so these are the results. This was what the process looked like before, and this is what it looked like afterwards. Whoops. So once you learn how to make these improvements like this, with focused improvements, you can drive up how much sales you can get. At the same time, you're reducing overtime, scrap, rework, inventory. So your expenses are going down and your profit can be much more. And these obstacles that we dealt with, your people are less stressed out and more prone to stay, right? Does that make sense? because work is less aggravating. And they got to do some of the actions to make it so. Now they own part of the process. Okay, so the benefits, customers are more satisfied, better on-time delivery, better lead times, better quality. The company's happier. You've got more throughput, meaning more sales. Then we have inventory goes down. So we have less work in process. We got higher inventory turns, which means better cash flow. We have lower operating expenses. How many of you think like the name of the game is cost reduction, right? Well, if you deal with the things that hinder your flow through the organization, that's going to get you all three of these dimensions. You're going to get more out the door, less inventory, and you're going to reduce your expenses. It's like you hit a grand slam instead of getting on base, except there's less risk. All right. So you have less material waste, rework, overtime, and lower turnover. Employees are more satisfied. They understand the process is better. They were included. They've got less effort and frustration. They're more effective, and they've got more confidence and pride. They don't feel as helpless. All right. And then this, by doing these things, you have increased potential for higher job security. You know, companies that are profitable even in a downturn because they're doing the right things, making their processes better, are less likely to lay people off, right? A company that doesn't have much profit, it's not going to be thinking like, should we increase our employees' benefits? However, if they're remarkably profitable, that might be a good option, right? So that they can have the pick of the cream of the crop for people applying to work there, and even increased pay. All right, so here's a little case study. One of the facilities that I worked at, they started with 42 people. They worked 9 hours a day plus for 5 days plus a half day or 5 hours on Saturday. And this is a 23,000 square foot facility, not real big, okay? So they were getting 8 units per day on first shift, on second 6, and they had no third shift. They were running 25% overtime. The little red is the overtime. And they were losing $150,000 per year. So for phase 1, we implemented 5S at the first 2 bottlenecks. We dealt with a supplier quality problem. And they added 2 people on second shift to help with these units that they produce. And so that allowed us to increase the services on second shift. But dealing with our bottlenecks in these 2 parts of the company, first shift could get a bunch more ready for them. So we went to 11 on first, it's 38% more. We went to 20 units on second shift, which is 3.3 times more. We didn't add 3 times the people, we added 2 people, okay? And we were able to cut overtime to 0. So we went to $1.3 million in profit at this point. And it took us about 3 months to implement this. Then we went to phase 2. We got to 14 units on first. We stayed at 20 on second. So we're 75% up from first, still no overtime, 2.5 million in profit per year. Phase 3, we implemented 5S at the remaining stations and did a little bit of other improvements. And we added a little thing outside to have more materials coming in, because now we're producing twice as much as we did when we started. And we're at 3.8 million per year in profit. And then for our last phase, management had more time and attention. They weren't dealing with a bunch of problems that they used to. So they're like, well, you know, we're not doing anything on third shift, so why don't we do something there too? So they added a few people. And by this time we're up to 52 people instead of 42. And we're at 46 units per day instead of 14. And this put them up to 5.7 million per year. It took us about 2 years to implement this. And everything we did here was relatively simple. Okay. So that's one example. Here's another one. This is from a steel foundry. Our heat treat ovens were our bottleneck. We could do 36 tons per day, and we could get 91 after 6 months of improvement. We multiplied it by 2.5 times our baseline. And I used our best month ever for the baseline. So we were working that department 24/7, and we were able to get it down to 24/5. So we went from 48 hours of mandatory overtime to 4 hours of voluntary overtime. And that meant we actually spent $250,000 less per year on overtime, but we gave 50,000 of it back to the employees by a $3 per hour raise. So they wouldn't leave, and we needed their expertise. Okay. But by not running heat treatment on the weekends, we saved $600,000 in utilities. Our on-time delivery went from 34% to 82%. That's not perfect, but it was a lot better, right? Our lead times went from 10 weeks down to 7 weeks. They were still getting shorter. And our sales was up by 25% more. So guess how much we spent on this department? $23,000. And that allowed us to make $700,000 more per month, plus the 200,000 in overtime. So it was a huge impact. They had laid off half of our employees before we did this, and a third of management. And we were able to bring them back, and everybody got a 16% bonus that year. So it was huge. I help organizations with training so that they're aware of skills and knowledge and methods. With coaching, you give them guidance on how to actually implement it and give them feedback on what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, what are the next steps, right? And with consulting, it's like you take a look at the whole thing and figure out first we should do that, then this, then that, then this, and you oversee and like make the magic happen. Okay, so you assess, diagnose, and prescribe, and even help implement. These are all the colleges that I've worked with in North Carolina so far. The ones that have the little diagonal lines are ones that I've had stuff quoted and we're that close. Okay, so there's a lot. And then I've got a couple in Illinois, one in Louisiana, and some other states that are coming along as well. As we train people, though, we need to help them with their people skills as well as their process skills, right? You can't just have this really friendly, great, totally equitable place to work, but not get any results because the processes that they work in are nightmarish. Okay, so if you're bad at both, you're going to have inept people and poor performance. If you're good with people, you might have a mediocre culture with some subpar results, or a really nice culture with subpar results. If you're process oriented but not people friendly, you're going to have a poor work environment with stagnant performance. So it's like you're going to be like barely performing, but at least consistent. All right. And then if you might have a poor work environment with some decent repeatable results. If you're in the middle, you have mediocre culture and mediocre results. With as you get up, you got a decent culture with some process improvement. You've got a good culture with mediocre performance. And if you make it all the way up here, you got a great culture with ever improving performance because you train people how to work together and collaborate, be humble and respectful, and come up with solutions. But they also dig in and understand their problems and their processes and address the things that actually make them better. Okay, makes sense? They deal with the facts and come up with solutions that are good for everybody. All right, so I've got a ton of training, but like this is like the ideal situation. You get the leadership trained first because they need to understand what they're expecting everybody else to do, right? They become the steering committee for the improvement, the strategic improvement project portfolio, right? Then you have yellow belt training for anybody that has anyone report to them or they're responsible for the performance of a process. Then you've got your green belts who are like a special set of people that they lead project teams to make things better, right? Then you have black belts, they're the full-time process improvement people. And then white belt training is good for anybody that doesn't get any higher levels of training. And then there's a bunch of other specific skills training. Sometimes we use these as appetizers when companies are trying to decide whether or not this is for them, okay? And this is the thing that helps get companies from this to this, okay? So these are a bunch of the classes that are on this slide, but a little bit of description. And essentially, if you want to get better, don't practice the same stuff different day. That's the nice way to say it, right? And expect to have better results. And just think like, well, when the economy gets better, then, we'll get better. It's like, well, yeah, so will everybody else, right? Including the competition. So if you're doing the same stuff and expecting different results, that's basically the definition of insanity, right? So instead, we should learn how to work smarter and not harder, and then proactively plan and take action to make things better, not just wish and hope. Okay, make sense? So I won't get into my background, but I've done this a lot. It's a lot of fun. Okay, it's like I get to teach people how to fish instead of fishing for them, right? You give them a fish, you feed them for a day, teach them to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime, right? Well, thank you guys all for coming, and spread the word. Okay, things don't have to be so hard. Okay.